Goodfellas cast finally reveals the secrets fans missed. Welcome to the definitive deep dive into one of cinema's most electrifying masterpieces. In the next 31 minutes, you'll discover astonishing truths about the creation of Goodfellas that will forever change how you view this classic. What if you learned that some of the film's most iconic moments were inspired not just by imagination, but by real danger, real criminals, and real chaos on set? We're about to reveal secrets that Hollywood buried for decades, stories so incredible they sound like fiction. Except every word is true. The making of this film involved death threats, mysterious visitors, and moments where the line between acting and reality completely disappeared. Cast members found themselves living in fear, not just of their characters, but of the very people those characters were based on. What you're about to discover will make you question everything you thought you knew about how movies are made. But before we dive in, if you're passionate about the history of film, the artistry of storytelling, and want to uncover secrets Hollywood rarely reveals, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss our unique content in the future. Join our community. Your voice matters here. Introduction. In 1990, Martin Scorsese delivered a jolt of cinematic energy unlike anything before. Goodfellas broke every rule, transformed the mob movie forever, and turned 3 decades of mafia life into a feverish sprint that left audiences stunned. Yet the real stories, the ones that unfolded behind the camera, are, if you can believe it, even more explosive than anything that made it to the screen. The film's production was a masterclass in controlled chaos, where improvisational genius met genuine danger. Every day on set brought new surprises, unexpected visitors, and moments that pushed the boundaries of what filmmaking could be. The cast never knew who might show up to observe their work, and the crew learned to navigate a world where technical advice came from sources they couldn't and wouldn't dare question. Just when you think the most jaw-dropping moments are on screen, the truth behind what happened on set is even more unbelievable. The atmosphere was so charged with authenticity that even seasoned Hollywood veterans found themselves genuinely intimidated by the people they encountered during production. Do you remember the first time you saw Goodfellas? Did you sense the electricity running beneath every scene? That feeling that something dangerously real was happening beyond the script? Share your first impressions and what scene stuck with you in the comments below. From book to screen. Few films survived a more treacherous journey to the screen. It began with the book Wise Guy, Nicholas Pileggi's riveting, no-punches-pulled account of Henry Hill's criminal life. The adaptation almost never happened. Martin Scorsese, already exhausted by the crime genre after Mean Streets and Raging Bull, left the manuscript unopened on his desk for months. Publishers had sent it to him repeatedly, but the director was convinced he'd already explored everything the mob movie could offer. As fate would have it, a desperate creative moment drew Scorsese to the book. Battling through a period of artistic uncertainty and struggling with the commercial failure of The Last Temptation of Christ, he finally opened what would become his defining project. Reading through the night, he discovered something unprecedented. A story told from the inside, without romanticism or mythology, just the raw, unglamorous truth of organized crime. The midnight partnership with Pileggi that followed would endure through years of studio resistance and legal nightmares. Their collaboration was unlike anything either had experienced, writer and director working so closely that distinguishing their individual contributions became impossible. They spent countless hours interviewing Henry Hill, sometimes in secret locations, always aware that their conversations could be monitored or interrupted. Every Hollywood studio initially said no, too violent, too ambiguous, too bleak. The notion of a mob film without a hero or redemption arc was heresy to the studio brass. Executives couldn't understand a story where the protagonist wasn't seeking redemption or facing a moral awakening. Even worse, they worried about the legal implications of portraying real people, many of whom were still alive and potentially dangerous. Even Warner Brothers, who finally took the risk, did so with heavy anxiety and multiple layers of legal protection. Their lawyers worked overtime, creating fictional names and composite characters to avoid lawsuits or worse. Legal entanglements loomed constantly, as many of the figures in Wise Guy were still alive, still active, or protected by law enforcement agreements that could be violated by the wrong portrayal. Entire character names and plot lines were altered simply to avoid confrontation with people who had killed for less than unflattering portrayals. The legal team maintained a careful balance, authentic enough to tell the true story, but altered enough to protect everyone involved from retaliation. Can you imagine the pressure on the filmmakers when the very people they were portraying could, at any time, confront them in real life? That tension seeps into every frame of the final product, creating an authenticity that goes beyond mere performance. The fear was real. The stakes were life and death, and everyone involved knew it. Does knowing that the boundaries between fiction and reality were so thin make the film feel more dangerous to you? Share your thoughts. How does knowing the real Henry Hill could appear at any moment reshape your perspective on the movie? What's even more shocking is that Henry Hill himself, officially forbidden to visit the set due to witness protection restrictions, sneaked on anyway multiple times. He simply couldn't resist seeing his story brought to life, despite the enormous risk to his safety and the production's security. Casting and authenticity. With the script as a living, evolving testament to real events, casting became a minefield where wrong choices could have consequences far beyond bad reviews. The studio executives wanted big stars. Tom Cruise was seriously considered for Henry Hill, and Alec Baldwin was their top choice for Jimmy Conway. They believed recognizable faces would guarantee box office success and provide insurance against the film's risky subject matter. But Scorsese saw something in Ray Liotta that no one else did. A rare combination of charm and latent danger that made him both sympathetic and terrifying. Liotta possessed an intensity that felt authentic, a working-class background that informed his understanding of the character, and most importantly, a hunger that mirrored Henry Hill's own desperate ambition. In a fate-tempting move, Liotta pursued the role with an obsession that bordered on stalking. He approached Scorsese at restaurants, film festivals, industry parties, anywhere he could make his case. His determination was so relentless that Scorsese later admitted he cast Liotta partly because the actor's pursuit of the role perfectly captured Henry Hill's tenacity and refusal to accept no for an answer. Robert De Niro's preparation took him into genuinely dangerous territory. His obsession with realism led him to call up real-life mobster Jimmy Burke in prison, completely ignoring legal boundaries and studio warnings in his quest for authenticity. The calls were so risky that prison guards eventually shut them down, but not before De Niro gathered crucial insights into Burke's mannerisms, speech patterns, and psychological makeup. De Niro also spent time with former associates of the real Jimmy Conway, learning everything from how he held a cigarette to the specific way he showed displeasure. These weren't acting exercises, they were anthropological studies of dangerous men who lived by codes most people couldn't comprehend. Joe Pesci, meanwhile, drew on his own brushes with the underworld from his youth in Newark, importing mannerisms and emotional unpredictability that felt dangerous even to veteran actors who had worked in crime films before. His background gave him an understanding of mob psychology that couldn't be taught in acting classes. Pesci's performance was so authentic that crew members sometimes felt genuinely uncomfortable around him when he was in character. The transformation was so complete that distinguishing between Pesci and Tommy became nearly impossible during filming. How important do you think casting is in turning a true crime story into a cinematic legend? When real people are being portrayed, does the responsibility to accuracy outweigh traditional acting considerations? Were there any performances in Goodfellas that impressed you more on second viewing? Let us know your pick for the most compelling actor and why. On set, technical advisors, some with obvious ties to organized crime, shared secrets that were never found in screenwriting textbooks or acting manuals. From the perfect way to slice garlic with a razor blade to the subtle cues of gangster etiquette that could mean the difference between respect and violence, every detail was vetted by people who knew the truth all too well. Occasionally, entire scenes were rewritten after notes from anonymous friends of the production suggested more accurate portrayals of events. These weren't suggestions. They were corrections, delivered with the kind of authority that nobody questioned. Filmmaking techniques and innovations. The technical audacity of Goodfellas rivaled even its bravest performances, pushing the boundaries of what was possible in mainstream filmmaking. The famous Copacabana tracking shot, now studied in film schools worldwide, required 7 days of rehearsal and over 20 takes to achieve perfection. Every person, every prop, every camera move, every single footstep was choreographed with a precision more demanding than the most complex ballet. The sequence wasn't about showing off technical prowess. It was about creating a visceral experience of power and privilege. Scorsese wanted audiences to feel Henry's gravitational pull, the way the world literally parted for him during his peak years. The camera becomes Henry's companion, sharing his confidence and swagger as doors open and obstacles disappear. Only after over a dozen failed takes, where everything from lighting cues to crowd movements went wrong, did the cast and crew achieve the seamless glide that became cinematic history. The technical crew worked with military precision, knowing that a single mistake would require starting over completely. And if you think you've seen all the tricks the film had up its sleeve, wait until we break down how editing, sound design, and even aspect ratio decisions fundamentally changed the way audiences experienced time, memory, and paranoia. These weren't just geeky technical feats. They were revolutionary approaches to storytelling that influenced decades of filmmaking that followed. The sound design team created what they called audio archaeology, layering sounds from different time periods to create psychological depth. Restaurant conversations from the 50s mixed with 70s disco, creating a temporal confusion that mirrored Henry's drug-addled state of mind in the film's final act. Just when you think you understand how the revolutionary editing techniques work, the story throws another curveball, like the iconic Layla montage. This sequence, born in the editing room through improvisational techniques that blurred past and present, cemented the film's unorthodox, relentless energy and became a template for crime films that followed. The montage wasn't originally scripted. Editor Thelma Schoonmaker discovered the emotional power of pairing Derek and the Dominoes epic with the discovery of murdered bodies, creating a sequence that was simultaneously beautiful and horrifying, exactly the contradiction that defined Henry Hill's world. Ever wondered how a single camera movement, a change in musical tempo, or a subtle jump cut can make your heart race or your skin crawl? Can you recall a specific technical moment in Goodfellas that made you feel physically uncomfortable or exhilarated? Dive into the comments. Let's discuss the craft behind these powerful emotional responses. Improvisation and realism. Improvisation became the secret weapon that elevated Goodfellas from great filmmaking to legendary cinema. The most unforgettable scenes, like Joe Pesci's explosive "Funny How" sequence, were not only unscripted, but completely unknown to most of the cast until they happened. Scorsese purposely withheld information, instructing actors individually and creating genuine tension that's impossible to fake. The famous restaurant scene was based on Pesci's real experience, but even he didn't know exactly when Scorsese would call for it during filming. Ray Liotta's fear in that scene is completely authentic. He had no idea whether Pesci was staying in character or genuinely losing his temper. Violence had to feel genuinely frightening and unpredictable, not choreographed Hollywood action. Scorsese insisted on single takes with no rehearsal, capturing raw reactions that couldn't be manufactured through multiple attempts. The chaos sometimes spilled past the camera, leaving the crew scrambling to keep up with emotional explosions that threatened to become real confrontations. Dialogue shifted from take to take, making traditional continuity impossible, but creating conversations that felt spontaneous and dangerous. During the cocaine paranoia sequences, Ray Liotta pushed himself to physical and mental exhaustion, deliberately foregoing sleep to channel Henry's unraveling mind. His delirium on set was, at crucial moments, indistinguishable from his character's psychological breakdown. The cast members often didn't know their co-stars' plans for each scene, creating genuine surprise and reaction. This technique was particularly effective in scenes involving Tommy's unpredictable violence, where other characters' fear was completely authentic because the actors never knew what Pesci might do next. Can real emotion ever truly emerge from pure acting technique, or does it require crossing the line into actual experience for a performance to achieve true authenticity? Where would you personally draw the line between method acting and genuine psychological risk? Join the debate in the comments and share your thoughts on how far actors should go for their craft. The film didn't just capture a story. It captured the actual feeling of living with constant threat, where violence could explode without warning and trust was a luxury nobody could afford. Scenes were continuously reworked, according to last-minute advice from both official consultants and unofficial sources, including actual mobsters who visited the set unannounced. Real-life mob influence and set interactions. This is where the story becomes genuinely haunting. On any given filming day, neither the cast nor the crew could be certain who would arrive on set or what their intentions might be. Legitimate technical advisors worked alongside individuals from the community who required no introduction or credentials. Their authority was simply understood and respected without question. Their feedback was delivered in whispers, meaningful glances, or cryptic suggestions that carried the weight of absolute authority. A real wise guy would never stand like that, or Jimmy would never wear a tie that color. These weren't artistic suggestions. They were corrections from people who knew the originals personally. The most chilling visits came from people who never identified themselves, but whose presence changed the entire atmosphere on set. Crew members learned to recognize certain cars in the parking lot, certain faces that meant filming would proceed with extra caution that day. Lorraine Bracco recalls encountering a woman who approached her between takes, offering advice about Karen Hill's mannerisms that only someone with intimate knowledge could provide. Only later did Bracco realize she'd likely received personal coaching from someone closely connected to the real Karen Hill, possibly Karen herself operating under an assumed identity. Props, jewelry, even the knots in neckties were adjusted to pass the exacting standards of uncredited, anonymous visitors who had lived these details firsthand. Nothing was too small to escape their notice. The way money was counted, how cigarettes were held, the proper etiquette for entering a restaurant with known associates. The tension wasn't confined to behind-the-camera interactions. At the film's premiere, individuals whom the characters were based on sat anonymously among the audience, remaining nearly invisible but very much present, watching their lives transformed into entertainment. Security for that premiere was unlike anything typically required for a film opening. The guest list was carefully monitored, but everyone understood that certain attendees couldn't be controlled or excluded. The atmosphere was electric, with an undercurrent of genuine danger that no amount of Hollywood glamour could disguise. What would it feel like to perform knowing that the story you're telling was under intense, silent scrutiny by people who had actually lived every moment? The psychological pressure was immense. But it also pushed performances to a level of authenticity that couldn't be achieved through traditional preparation. Would you be able to perform under that kind of psychological pressure? Imagine if the people whose lives you were portraying were sitting just a few rows away, judging every gesture and line delivery. Would you thrive under that scrutiny or completely freeze? Let us know how you'd handle it. Would you want to meet the person whose life you're bringing to the screen? Revolutionary performances and character portrayals. Goodfellas redefined what screen acting could accomplish, abandoning decades of Hollywood convention in favor of raw, uncompromising authenticity. Gone were the days of morally sanitized protagonists who learned valuable lessons or found redemption through suffering. Ray Liotta's Henry Hill doesn't beg for audience sympathy or explain his moral choices. He simply exists, compelling and irredeemably flawed, forcing viewers to confront their own fascination with his lifestyle. Liotta's performance was a high-wire act of sustained intensity that required him to make Henry simultaneously attractive and repulsive, often within the same scene. His natural charisma made Henry's criminal success believable, while his gradual descent into paranoia and desperation showed the inevitable cost of that success. Joe Pesci's Tommy DeVito became a powder keg of unpredictability, whose rehearsals were so psychologically immersive that his explosive outbursts on camera frequently surprised everyone except Scorsese. Pesci didn't just play a character. He channeled a type of street psychology that most actors could only approximate through research and imagination. His preparation involved not just studying the script, but immersing himself in the mindset of someone for whom violence was a casual tool for maintaining respect and control. The transformation was so complete that crew members genuinely avoided him when he was in character, unsure where Tommy ended and Joe began. Robert De Niro's portrayal of Jimmy Conway demonstrated the power of restraint in a film full of explosive personalities. His stillness invoked genuine menace, his presence both magnetic and threatening, suggesting depths of violence that were all the more frightening for being held in check. De Niro understood that real power doesn't need to advertise itself through constant aggression. His research extended beyond interviews and observation to actually spending time in environments where such men operated, learning their codes and hierarchies through direct exposure rather than academic study. Lorraine Bracco refused to play Karen Hill as a mere accessory to Henry's story, instead creating a fully realized character who was both victim and willing participant in the criminal lifestyle. Her Karen was intelligent, aware, and complicit, a partner who understood exactly what world she was entering and chose it anyway for the excitement and material benefits it provided. Bracco's research included interviews with wives and girlfriends of organized crime figures, learning how these women navigated the contradictions of loving men whose work required violence and deception. Her performance captured the psychological complexity of choosing a dangerous life while maintaining the illusion of normalcy. Each performance drew on specific, deeply researched details that went far beyond surface mannerisms. The actors learned not just how these people looked and spoke, but how they thought, what motivated them, and what psychological mechanisms allowed them to justify their actions to themselves and their families. True commitment meant drawing so close to the character's psychological reality that the lines between actor and role became dangerously blurred. Several cast members reported having dreams where they couldn't distinguish between their own memories and their characters' experiences. How much do you think absolute authenticity matters when telling true crime stories? Can an actor's refusal to sanitize or sympathize with a character make the story feel more honest, or does it risk making them completely unlikable to audiences? Share your thoughts in the comments about the balance between authenticity and audience connection. Technical achievements and challenges. Every technical choice in Goodfellas served the greater purpose of immersing audiences in the lived experience of its characters. creating innovations that are still studied and emulated by filmmakers today. The breakthroughs in filming, editing, and sound design didn't exist for their own sake. Each was developed to make viewers feel as paranoid, elated, and desperate as Henry Hill during his various stages of criminal life. The editing team pioneered what they called consciousness cutting, where scenes were assembled not according to linear time, but according to the emotional logic of memory and association. This technique was particularly effective during Henry's drug-fueled final day, where time becomes elastic and paranoia transforms ordinary events into potential threats. The sound design introduced revolutionary audio flash-forwards that allowed audiences to hear future scenes bleeding into present moments, creating a fractured narrative that plunged viewers directly into Henry's increasingly unstable mental state. These weren't mistakes or stylistic flourishes. They were carefully calculated psychological manipulations designed to make audiences share Henry's confusion and fear. The team also developed new techniques for layering ambient sound, creating sonic environments that felt authentic to specific time periods and locations. Restaurant conversations, street noise, and background music were recorded separately and combined to create acoustic landscapes that supported the story's emotional journey. Makeup and set design were tailored not only for historical accuracy, but to visually communicate the psychological and physical toll that decades of criminal life imposed on the human body. Characters aged not just through makeup, but through changes in posture, energy, and the way they occupied space within the frame. The film's relatively tight aspect ratio was a deliberate choice meant to communicate psychological claustrophobia rather than simple artistic preference. As Henry's world closes in on him, the visual frame itself becomes a metaphor for his trapped situation. Freeze frames, voice-over narration, and non-linear temporal jumps are now standard elements of cinematic language, but here they were forged out of necessity rather than convention. Each technique served the specific goal of making audiences understand crime from the inside out, experiencing both its attractions and its inevitable consequences. Perhaps the boldest innovations are the ones that remain invisible to most viewers. Each creative risk, from experimental editing techniques to unconventional music choices, represented a calculated bet that audiences would follow the filmmakers into unexplored territory. Just when you think you understand the full scope of the film's technical innovations, we discover another layer of audacious experimentation that influenced not just crime films, but American cinema as a whole. Impact and legacy. Upon release, Goodfellas didn't just wow audiences. It fundamentally altered the DNA of American filmmaking, creating new possibilities for how stories could be told and what subjects could be explored. Filmmakers, critics, and scholars immediately recognized that Scorsese had rewritten the fundamental rules of cinematic narrative. Voice-over narration, once considered a clumsy screenwriting crutch, suddenly became a powerful weapon for creating intimacy and psychological depth. The technique spread rapidly through Hollywood, but few directors understood how to use it with Scorsese's precision and purpose. The non-linear structure, previously confined to art house experimentation, proved that mainstream audiences were hungry for more sophisticated storytelling approaches. Films could jump through time, shift perspectives, and challenge viewers without losing commercial appeal. Young directors began calling producers not for jobs, but for the secret recipe. How exactly did they achieve that perfect balance of style and substance? The film proved that technical innovation and emotional authenticity weren't opposing forces, but could work together to create something entirely new. A film that cost $25 million to produce and earned $46 million domestically proved that audiences were ready for more complex, morally ambiguous entertainment. The financial success gave studios confidence to greenlight similarly challenging projects, For the cast members, however, the film's success created unexpected complications. Many found themselves permanently associated with their characters, typecast in roles that demanded similar intensity and moral complexity. The shadow of Goodfellas followed them for years, influencing not just the roles they were offered, but how audiences perceived them in other contexts. Ray Liotta, in particular, struggled with the double-edged sword of giving such a memorable performance that it overshadowed everything else he did. The role made his career, but also limited it in ways he hadn't anticipated. Most importantly, Goodfellas demonstrated that mainstream crime stories could possess both glamour and horror, seduction and destruction, without resolving the contradiction through moral judgment or redemptive conclusions. This approach influenced not just films, but television, literature, and how true crime stories are told across all media. From The Sopranos to Breaking Bad, from Pulp Fiction to The Departed, every morally complex anti-hero in American entertainment owes something to Henry Hill's unapologetic self-presentation. Are there modern films or television shows that capture your imagination with similar intensity and moral complexity? Which contemporary directors do you think best carry on Scorsese's legacy of combining technical innovation with psychological authenticity? Let's spotlight the new masterpieces. Share your picks and explain what makes them worthy successors to Goodfellas in the comments section. Conclusion. As far back as we can remember, some stories refuse to fade from cultural memory, continuing to influence and inspire decades after their creation. What began as a book that nearly didn't become a movie transformed into a legend that fundamentally reshaped American cinema and our understanding of what films could accomplish. We've explored the incredible secrets, the professional risks, and the once-in-a-lifetime performances that combined to turn Goodfellas into lightning captured in a bottle. Its enduring genius lies not simply in its technical craft or memorable performances, but in the perfect storm of circumstances that created it. A director ready to gamble his career, actors hungry to discover uncharted territory, and a production that danced daily on the knife's edge between artistic truth and physical danger. The film's lasting achievement extends beyond entertainment. It showed what movies could accomplish when conventional rules are abandoned in favor of authentic human experience, when the pursuit of truth takes precedence over comfortable fiction, and when filmmakers are willing to risk everything for the sake of their vision. The techniques pioneered in Goodfellas continue to influence filmmakers worldwide, while its approach to morally complex storytelling opened doors for countless projects that followed. Its impact on popular culture extends far beyond cinema, changing how we understand and discuss crime, loyalty, family, and the American dream's dark underbelly. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the making of Goodfellas and want more stories that reveal the hidden truths behind legendary films, hit that like button, share this video with fellow film enthusiasts, and subscribe for more content that goes deeper than surface-level entertainment journalism. We uncover the real stories that other channels hesitate to explore, bringing you the authentic behind-the-scenes experiences that shaped cinema history. Thank you for being part of our community. What kind of videos would you like us to make next? Let us know in the comments. See you on the next video.